All right, so you're here because you want to get a real grasp on some seriously complex stuff, right? You want to understand the ins and outs, but who wants to wade through mountains of information to get there?
And that's where we come in. We take those deep dives, do the legwork for you, sift through everything, and bring back the gems so you get a clear view without the information overload headache.
Exactly. And this time we've dug into a really fascinating, kind of mysterious document for you. One that delves into, get this, the art of Dim Mak.
Dim Mak. Yeah, you might have heard of it. It's the martial art, or at least the theory behind it, that's all about hitting super specific points on the body. And I mean really specific, to create all kinds of effects.
Like what kinds of effects? Give us the overview. What's in this document we found?
Well, our source lays out a map of these Dim Mak points. It pinpoints where they are in the body, and then it gets into what it describes as the potential results when you actually strike these points.
So it's like a guide to pressure points and what happens when you hit them. Okay, so disclaimer time. We have to emphasize here that this information comes straight out of martial arts practices and theories, so naturally our discussion is going to reflect that context. We're not doctors or scientists, so we're not trying to prove or disprove anything here from a medical perspective. We're just diving into what this document lays out.
Yeah, you got it. Think of it as an exploration, a guided tour, if you will, into this compelling and, let's be honest, potentially dangerous aspect of martial arts philosophy.
Gotcha. So we're investigating a specific piece of martial arts theory here.
Right.
Okay. So before we jump into the nitty-gritty of each point, I noticed the document mentions some fundamental ideas, concepts that underpin Dim Mak. Things like qi, that vital energy that's supposed to flow through the body and meridians, those pathways that the qi travels along, and of course the balance of yin and yang. I'm thinking our listener might appreciate a quick refresher on how these principles are described as connecting to the effects of Dim Mak strikes.
It's all about how these core concepts from traditional Chinese medicine ideas like qi and meridians, how they're woven into this Dim Mak theory. So the document is basically suggesting that these super specific points, the ones we're talking about, they actually lie along these meridian pathways. And when you strike them, you're essentially disrupting the flow of qi. And that disruption is what causes the various effects the document describes, at least according to this theory.
Okay, so it's not just about the physical force of the strike, but about how that force disrupts the energy flowing through these meridians.
Exactly. You hit the point, you disrupt the qi, and that throws off the balance of yin and yang in the body. And according to the document, that's where all these different effects stem from. Everything from localized pain to, get this, impacts on how your organs function and even your emotional state.
Oh.
It's pretty wild.
So the physical and energetic aspects of the body are totally intertwined in this system.
Yeah, you could say that. It's all connected.
Interesting. All right, so that gives us our framework, right? The foundation for understanding the specifics. So let's get down to it. Let's start by looking at what the document has to say about the lung meridian, or LU for short. The first point it mentions is LU4, or XIABI. Where exactly is that point located, and what happens, according to the document, when you strike it?
LU4, which has this really cool poetic name, gallantry, is on the inside of your upper arm. Imagine you're tracing a line from LU3, is another point on the meridian, downwards. LU4 is about a thumb width below that, on the side of your arm towards your radius bone.
Radius bone, that's the one on the thumb side of the forearm, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's right alongside the biceps brachii muscle.
Yeah.
So about the effects, well, the document says that striking LU4 can have similar effects to hitting LU3, but potentially even worse.
Worse in what way?
Well, think worse, local pain, a more intense shock sensation, almost electric. It even mentions that it's like a nerve strike, momentarily causing the brain to basically shut down the body. And here's the kicker. The document suggests there could be emotional issues later on, although maybe not as intense as if you hit LU3.
Whoa, so hitting LU4 is like a 1-2 punch. First, you get that immediate physical impact, that intense shock. Then down the line, you could be dealing with some emotional fallout.
That's what the document seems to be saying, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Let's move down the arm a bit to the next point. We've got LU5, or CHIZE, which translates to cubit marsh. What can you tell us about that one?
So LU5, you'll find that in the crook of your elbow, the inside of your elbow on the side towards the ulna bone. That's the bone on the pinky finger side of the forearm. And it's right on the side of the biceps tendon closest to the radius bone. The document makes it pretty clear that hitting this point can cause some major disruption.
What kind of disruption?
Well, it mentions potential damage to the whole system, throwing off both physical and qi balances in the upper body. And it specifically says that striking with a relaxed, heavy arm, they call it a dead arm strike, has a good chance of causing a knockout. Oh, and there's even a warning about possible brain damage from a really powerful blow.
Seriously?
Yeah, no joke. It also points out that LU5 is what they call a He-C point. That means hitting it is supposed to drain qi straight from your lungs, which would instantly sap your strength, since the lungs are considered a powerhouse in the body's energy system.
So a strike to LU5 could really take someone down, both in the short term and potentially long term.
It's definitely presented as a significant point. Yeah.
Okay. Next up on the lung meridian, we've got LU6. That's KONZUI, or opening maximum. Even the name sounds intense.
It does.
What's the lowdown on that one?
Well, LU6 is on the palm side of your forearm, about 7 thumb widths above LU9. It's on that line connecting LU9 and LU5, situated right in the brachioradialis muscle. Now, the document describes this one as being really potent.
In what way?
It says a solid hit to LU6 can cause instant paralysis of the lower arm. And the person who gets hit, they might actually feel like they were hit directly in their lungs, even though the strike is on the forearm. And here's something interesting. LU6 is a Gleichkräfte point, which means a strike here has the opposite effect of what you'd use it for in healing.
That's fascinating. So it's like a point that can be used for good or bad, depending on the intention.
Exactly. And the document specifically mentions that LU6 is like an emergency release valve for lung qi if they've been hit. But get this, if you strike it after a lung strike, well, that's when things get really dicey. The document says that could lead to deaths within minutes.
Wow. Because the body's reserve key can't kick in.
Exactly. It's like a safety mechanism that gets turned against you.
That's intense. All right, let's keep moving along the lung meridian. Next, we have LU7, LUQE, or broken sequence. This one's on the wrist, but the document suggests it can pack a serious punch. What does it say about it?
Yeah, the document emphasizes that even though LU7 is on the wrist, a strike there can cause some serious pain and a massive key drain.
So location isn't everything in this system.
Right. Placement is key. LU7 is above that bony bump on the thumb side of your wrist, the radial styloid process, about 1.5 thumb widths above the wrist crease. You'll find it in that little dip between the brachioradialis and abductor pollicis longus tendons. Even just pressing on it for a while, like in a joint lock, can be really painful.
Yikes. Okay, so what about the effects of a strike to LU7?
The key drain is supposed to be so bad that the person who's hit might have to sit down right away. The document even says a light strike can cause a knockout. And there's this other interesting effect. It mentions something called artificial grief. Apparently it messes with the yin and yang balance between the lung and colon, leading to this state of artificial grief. And it also supposedly makes it harder to learn physical skills, a problem that gets worse over time.
Artificial grief. That's a strange and unsettling effect to be associated with a physical strike on the wrist. It really highlights that mind-body connection this system emphasizes, doesn't it?
Totally.
Okay, next in line on the lung meridian, we have LU8. That's JINGQU, meaning across the ditch. This one's connected to the body's natural energy cycles throughout the day, according to the document. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, the document gets into this whole temporal aspect, this idea of timing and how it relates to energy flow. LU8, you can find that about a thumb width above your wrist crease on the thumb side. It's right where you can feel your radial artery pulsing. The document describes this one as a major key drainer, making it a good setup point for other attacks. It even compares it to HT5, which is a point on the heart meridian, saying that overstimulating HT5 with acupuncture can cause a knockout, and suggesting that LU8 might have a similar potential.
Interesting.
And here's where the timing comes in. LU8 is a metal point and a Jing River point, but it's also the horary point of the lung channel.
Horary point.
Yeah, that means it's most active during a specific 2-hour window when the lung energy peaks in the 24-hour cycle.
So like the lungs have their own rush hour.
Exactly. And striking LU8 during that peak activity is said to really mess with the lung qi. And this imbalance is described as getting worse every day until it's healed.
That sounds bad. What kinds of problems can that cause?
The document mentions sleep disturbances, especially between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. And because of the energy cycles, hitting LU8 can also lead to increased urination since, according to this system, the bladder meridian has the least qi at that time, the opposite time in the cycle.
Seems like a ripple effect, messing with the whole flow of energy throughout the day.
Yeah, basically throwing your body's natural clock out of whack.
Fascinating. All right, we're wrapping up our look at the lung meridian with LU9, Taiyuan, or Great Abyss. This one sounds like it's targeting something pretty fundamental. What does the document have to say about it?
LU9 is at your wrist crease. On the thumb side, we can feel that pulse again, the radial artery. It's right between the tendons of the flexor carpi radialis and abductor pollicis longus muscles. The document says it's another big key drainer and a painful one too, making it a good point to hit as a setup for other techniques. But here's what's really interesting. It's labeled as an earth, yuan, and shu point. It's also a special meeting point for the pulse, so it's a pretty significant location. It can be used for setting up other attacks, but the document says you need a super precise strike for it to be effective.
So not a great point to target if you're in a really close fight.
Exactly. Too much room for error. If you do hit it right, though, the document says it can cause really erratic breathing, making the person feel like they're suffocating.
Intense. Okay, so that's the rundown on the lung meridian points, at least according to this document. Now let's move on to the large intestine meridian, or CO for short. The first point mentioned here is CO5, Yang Ekeshai, which translates to adjoining valley. This one's described as a natural short out point. What makes it a short out point?
Yeah. CO5, it's on the thumb side of your wrist, right in that groove between the tendons of the extensor pollicis longus and brevis muscles when you tilt your thumb up. Now, what makes it a short out point? The document links it with SI2, a point on the small intestine meridian, and says together they create a natural short out. Hitting both at the same time is supposed to cause a ton of pain and make it pretty easy to take someone down to their knees. It talks about applying pressure diagonally across the back of the wrist to hit both CO5 and SI2.
So it's all about targeting two connected points for a combined effect.
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting when you think about the elements. CO5 is associated with fire and SI2 with water in traditional Chinese medicine.
Right, so hitting them together is like a clash of elements.
Yeah, like a short circuit in the system.
Wow. Okay, next on the large intestine meridian, we have CO6, PIA nali, or partial order. This one's interesting because the document mentions potential long-term emotional effects. Tell us a bit more about that.
CO6 is about 3 thumb widths above CO5, on that line that runs between CO5 and CO11. It's on the thumb side of your forearm. Now, according to the document, hitting CO6 is a big key drainer and causes local pain. A hard enough strike can even cause a knockout. But what's really noteworthy here is the suggestion that it messes with the communication between what they call the upper and lower heaters in the body.
Heaters?
Yeah, in traditional Chinese medicine, these are areas in the body that are related to how qi circulates. The idea is that hitting CO6 disrupts the flow between these heaters, causing an imbalance. And the document says that in the long run, this can actually contribute to emotional problems.
Emotional problems from a physical strike. How's that work?
They link it to the suppression of negative emotions and thoughts. The idea is that striking this point can make it harder to process those emotions in a healthy way. So it's not just about the immediate pain and physical impact, but about potential long-term consequences for emotional well-being.
Interesting. So it's not just about knocking someone down, it's about potentially impacting them on a deeper level.
Yeah, it's a more subtle but potentially long-lasting effect.
All right. Next up is CO7, Wei En Lu, meaning worm slide. This one's a G cleft or accumulation point, just like Lu6. What's that mean in terms of what happens when you strike it?
Right, so CO7, you'll find that about 5 thumb widths above CO5 when your fist is clenched with the palm down, elbow bent.
Got it. And the effect?
As a G cleft point, it's where qi is supposed to build up along the meridian. Striking CO7 can cause local pain and a qi drain, and you might feel pain along the whole large intestine channel.
Oh.
Yeah. And of course, if you hit it hard enough, it can cause a knockout. Now, the document says this is a good point to hit as a setup for another strike to CO11.
Ah, so a strategic combo.
Right. It also says that even a relatively light hit to CO7, if you combine it with hitting a neurological shutdown point, like across the jaw, can make a knockout more likely.
So these points can be used in combination to amplify their effects.
Exactly. It's like a 1-2 punch.
Got it. Okay, moving on to CO8. We have celian, meaning lower integrity. The document points out a powerful synergy between this point and a point on the lung meridian. Can you explain that for us?
Celian, CO8, is about 4 thumb widths below CO11 on the back of your forearm, towards the radius bone side. The document says that while it's not a Schi's cleft point, it can still cause a knockout if you hit it hard enough. But here's where it gets interesting. There's this synergy with Lu1.
That's the point on the chest, right?
Right. Striking Lu1 and then hitting CO8 shortly after, well, the document claims that'll drain the body's power tenfold.
Tenfold. So that's game over.
Pretty much. It's saying that combination basically takes all the fight out of someone.
Wow. Okay, let's move up the form a bit. We have CO9, Shanglian, or upper integrity. This one is said to directly target the arm and hand. What's the deal with that?
Shanghai in CO9 is about 3 thumb widths below CO11, so it's right above CO8 on the back of your forearm, again towards the radius side. The document says hitting this point will paralyze your hand and arm.
And what about using it with LU1, like with CO8?
Well, similar to CO8, the document says using CO9 in combo with LU1 will lead to such a huge loss of power that it's basically the end of the fight.
It really seems like LU1 is a key player in amplifying the effects of strikes on the large intestine meridian.
It definitely seems that way based on this document, yeah.
Fascinating. All right, next up we have CO10, Shosinanlai, or arms 3 measure. This one is described as having a bunch of different effects depending on which way you strike it. That's pretty interesting, right? Can you break that down for us?
Shosinanlai CO10 is about 2 thumb widths below C11. You can find it on the thumb side of your radius bone, right in those extensor carpi radialis brevis and longus muscles. The document says hitting CO10 can paralyze the arm and sometimes even stop the heart.
Whoa!
Yeah, it can get pretty intense. It also talks about a shock wave that shoots up into the upper body, and of course a hard strike can lead to a knockout. Oh, and they mention CO10 a lot with ST9, which is a point on the stomach meridian, as a death blow combo.
A death blow, that's all pretty self-explanatory. So what about the direction of the strike? How does that play into it?
Right, that's a key part of it.
Yeah.
The document says an upward strike to CO10 might lead to chi loss in the lower body and nausea, heading downwards. Could cause an instant bowel movement. And a straight strike might cause spasms in the lower abdomen, arm paralysis, and you guessed it, diarrhea.
So 1 point, but a bunch of different outcomes depending on how you hit it.
It's pretty wild.
All right, let's move on to CO11, QUCHI, or crooked pool. This one is described as a major earth and heat point, and the document says its effects can be reversed if you hit it with what's called negative chi. It's a pretty interesting concept, right?
Yeah, that's one of the more mystical aspects of this system. QCHI CO11, you'll find that in the dip at the outer end of your elbow crease when your elbow's bent, it's roughly halfway between LU5 and that bony bump on the outside of your elbow, the lateral epicondyle. Now, as a major earth and He point, it's usually thought of as a calming point, the kind that regulates the body's systems. But the document says that hitting it with negative ki flips that effect on its head. It can damage the elbow joint and potentially weaken all the joints in the body. And on top of that, it can cause diarrhea and vomiting and mess with the balance between the shen, which you can think of as the spirit or mind, and the physical body.
So your intention when you strike the point influences the outcome.
That's the idea. It's not just about where you hit, but how and with what energy. Oh, and the document also warns that the striker could hurt their own hand on the target's elbow, suggesting a palm strike might be a better technique here.
Good tip. Okay, so moving on, we've got CO12, ZA Shuli Ao, the elbow seam. This one sounds like it can quickly take someone out of a fight.
CO12, it's about a thumb width above and a little to the outside of C11 when your elbow's bent. It's on the inside of your upper arm bone, right near where the anconeus muscle starts, and the outer edge of your triceps. The document says hitting it downwards towards the elbow can drain a lot of chi. It describes this specific strike, a knife-edge palm strike, where you angle your palm down a bit and then roll it upwards like you're making a cutting motion.
Ouch.
Yeah, it sounds pretty painful. And the document says most people won't be able to do much physically after a good hit to this point.
So a very effective disabling strike. Next, we have CO13, HOUI, or 5 measures on the arm. The document describes this one more as a nerve strike that focuses on pain. What more can you tell us about that?
CO13, it's above that bony bump on the outside of your elbow, the lateral epicondyle, about 3 thumb widths above CO11. It's on the line connecting CO11 and CO15. The document calls it a nerve point strike, one that causes a lot of pain and nervous shock.
So it's less about brute force and more about targeting the nerves.
Yeah, exactly. It says the pain gets really intense really quickly. So intense that it could incapacitate the person.
Effective.
And even though a hard strike is going to maximize the pain, it says you don't necessarily need a ton of force to be effective. It's more about hitting the nerve just right.
Okay, so precision over power. Gotcha. Next, we have CO14, bineo, arm and scapula. The document says this one is one of the 7-star key input-output points. That sounds pretty important in the body's energy system.
Bineo, C14 is on the outside of your upper arm bone, just above the lower part of the deltoid muscle. It's on that line between CO11 and CO15. Now, as one of those 7-star points, along with GV20, SI16, which is mentioned twice, and GB30 also mentioned twice, it's thought to be a point where energy enters the body. It's often used in Qigong stances.
Right.
And the document says that striking CO14 blocks energy from coming in at this important point. That supposedly makes the person feel weak, and it might even cause some serious emotional problems because energetically, things just aren't working the way they should.
So like a fundamental energy disruption.
Yeah, something like that.
All right. And finally, for the large intestine meridian, we have CO15, JRANYU, meaning shoulder bone. This one is noted more for its potential to cause physical damage, as opposed to a major qi disruption. What does the document say about striking this point?
CL15 is in that little hollow spot in front of and below the bony point at the top of your shoulder, the acromion. It's in the middle of your upper deltoid muscle. If you lift your arm all the way out to the side, it's the more forward of those two dips you can feel at the front edge of your acromioclavicular joint. The document says this isn't a major point for causing Qi damage. In fact, it's often used for healing. But if you hit it hard enough, it can break or dislocate the shoulder.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's definitely a point you wouldn't want to get hit in.
Okay, so that's our tour of the large intestine meridian. It's pretty wild to see how many different effects are described, from immediate pain to long-term emotional issues and even structural damage. Let's switch gears now and look at the stomach meridian, or ST. The document highlights a few points here that have a wide range of effects, and they're spread all over the body. We'll start with ST6, Jayid, which means jaw vehicle. This one is often shown in movies as a knockout point. What makes it so effective, according to this document?
Jyak, ST6, is about a finger's width in front of and a bit above the angle of your jaw, where the masseter muscle, the one you use to chew, bulks up when you clench your teeth. Now, the document says that any strike to the tip of the jaw is going to be pretty bad news, and ST6 is no exception.
Right.
They say it's an instant knockout point, which you see all the time in movies and TV. And the reason they give is that it's right near what they call the mind point, which is thought to mess with signals going to the brain from the central nervous system.
So it's like short-circuiting the brain's connection to the body?
Yeah, kind of. The document also says a hit to ST6 can cause concussion because of the shockwave that goes to the brain.
Ouch.
Yeah. It can cause a knockout, nausea, even memory loss. It even goes into detail about typical concussion symptoms. So basically, hitting ST6 is a double whammy. You've got the direct neurological impact and the concussive force of the blow.
Wow. All right. Let's move on to ST9, RNYing, or man's welcome, which is located in a pretty vulnerable spot right on the neck. The document mentions some specific risks associated with striking this point. What can you tell us about that?
Wying, ST9, it's level with the tip of your Adam's apple right along the path of the carotid artery on the front edge of that sternocleidomastoid muscle, the big one that runs down the side of your neck.
That's a sensitive area.
It is, and the document calls ST9 a serious knockout point. They say a hit there sends a shock wave of qi straight into the brain, which can cause dizziness or knock you out cold. It even mentions a possible broken jaw. Yeah. It emphasizes striking straight in from the side for maximum effect. It also links ST9 to ST1 and ST8, which might be why it's also called a great meeting. It suggests that a knockout could happen both because of its effect on the heart through the carotid sinus and from too much yang qi surging to the brain.
So it affects both the physical and the energetic systems.
Exactly. The document points out all the qi and blood flowing through that area, which makes the impact on the brain so powerful. It also mentioned vagus nerve endings near the stomach, suggesting that striking ST9 could affect that nerve too, making it even more effective for knocking someone out.
Right.
Oh, and it mentions this kind of ominously, that ST9 is often used with CO10 for a death blow.
A death blow. Well, that's definitely not something to mess around with.
Nope. It's serious business. The document makes it very clear that this is a high-risk point, and hitting it can have some serious consequences.
Definitely. Okay, moving down to the torso, the next stomach meridian point we have is ST19, Barong, or uncontainable. This one targets the diaphragm. What kind of effect does striking this point have?
Barong, ST19, is about 6 thumb widths above your navel and 2 thumb widths to the side of the conception vessel midline. The document compares it to ST18, implying that ST19 has a way bigger impact.
Interesting. So how does striking it affect the diaphragm?
It says it attacks the seat of power, kind of like CV17, but even more damaging to the diaphragm because it hits those muscles that control your breathing.
So you can't breathe properly.
Right. The document says it can make the person feel totally powerless and collapse. It even says a hard enough strike can cause death by suffocation because they just can't breathe.
That's really scary. So it's a very direct attack on a vital function. Okay, next we have ST25, Tianfu, Heaven's axis, which is a mu point of the colon. The document suggests that hitting this point has both physical and emotional consequences. Can you tell us more about that?
Tianqiu, ST25, is about 2 thumb widths to the side of your belly button. Being the moo point of the colon, hitting it is supposed to directly affect the colon, which is pretty vulnerable down there below the navel. A strong hit can cause a knockout, and it's also very likely to cause, well, immediate diarrhea.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And here's the emotional side of things. The document says this point can cause emotional problems and all the physical symptoms that come with them.
How so?
It says it disrupts the communication between the Shen Daling, that spirit or mind we talked about before, and the Zhang Fu organs, specifically the gallbladder and triple heater.
So a physical strike messing with the energy of specific organs, which then leads to emotional problems.
That's the idea. The document says that at first the person might feel this spreading circular pain,
Right.
and then they lose a lot of their power overall.
That connection between physical impact and emotional well-being, that's something we've been seeing pop up a lot, right?
Yeah, definitely a recurring theme.
Okay, moving down to the leg on the stomach meridian, we have ST32 FUTU, or hidden rabbit. This point is described as one that can paralyze the leg. What's the technique for striking it effectively?
FUTU, SD32. It's about 6 thumb widths above the outer upper edge of your kneecap. If you imagine a line running from that bony point on the front of your hip, the anterior superior iliac spine, to the outer edge of your kneecap, FT32 is on that line within the rectus femoris muscle on the front of your thigh.
Okay, and how do you hit it to paralyze the leg?
The document says to paralyze the leg, you have to hit it at a 180-degree angle right across the thigh. Doesn't matter if you use your palm or a weapon.
Gotcha, and the effect.
They say it causes paralysis of the leg, shocks the whole system, and can even lead to a knockout if you hit it hard enough.
Right.
Apparently, the brain just gets overloaded by that sudden impact.
So angle and force are key. Okay. Next, we have ST36, Z as Erle, which is a pretty well-known point in acupuncture, right?
Yeah, it's a popular one.
What does the document have to say about its implications for Dim Mak?
Well, the document doesn't go into a ton of detail about how you'd use ST36 and DIM.